Hey everybody, we're back again. I'm Jason Bosch. I'm here with Alison McDowell and Lynn Strawn Davenport. And Alison, as we're all trying to, or at least myself, trying to like move through the dust of Alison's research of trying to, I'm over here, still trying to wrap my mind around this thing, and she's off to another new thing. So
as long as it's not data dust.
Data dust. Yeah, we're trying.
No data dust.
We're sifting through the research dust. So anyways, Alison wanted to do another presentation. She also wanted to talk to Lynn about some things that are going on down in Texas that Lynn was at the hearings. What did they have hearings? Is that?
Yeah, it was a work study to study blockchain and how it can be expanded in Texas. And we tried to alert them to the fact that it's already expanded in Texas in education. So they can just study what's already happening.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, so Alison, you put some more slides together because, we wouldn't have a show without 100 slides. I don't think this one's too bad.
Not 100.
Blockchain and hybridized life. You want to just talk a little bit about what you've been uncovering more recently?
Yeah, well, so I wanted to check in with Lynn because I've been doing a lot of work in California looking at their plan for proposed legislation for a trust framework, which they don't call blockchain identity, but it's the underpinnings for blockchain identity. And so I think it's really an interesting case study to understand that blockchaining human beings, blockchaining systems, in and of itself generates value in this new data economy. That's just the logic of the new market that we're living in. And so it makes there's a logic to it in the markets that you would want to go after the two most populous states in the US to go with, both from a social impact finance standpoint and for all of the other stuff, biomedical records, educational technology, in and outside of pay for success finance, that Texas and California are the two states that you would want to get on board. But what's quite fascinating to me from sort of a distance is to see the stories that are being told. And because they're two very different, at least on the surface, worldviews. The state of California identified as sort of the progressive state, the state of Texas traditionally conservative, now with lots of fleeing Californians, right? So how do they spin the narrative in both states to accomplish what they want is ultimately to get everyone on blockchain so that they can engineer economies and other, even down to biocomputation. So for me, I thought that was an interesting case point to look at this proposed California trust framework against, which is framed largely as sort of against the backdrop of social progressivism, community care, community schools, community health systems, with what you're seeing in Texas, which I think is much more crypto, economic freedom, innovation. It's a very different narrative. So anyway, I just wanted to open in Lynn and see if you had any thoughts on that, because again, you participated in a public hearing on blockchain, and if you maybe have some reflections on how that day went and anything you might want to add.
So the work group on blockchain matters was created by a House Bill 1576. This was during the 87th legislature for Texas. So the whole idea was to come up with this master plan because they want to expand the blockchain industry in Texas. Texas wants to be a leader. Our governor is supporting this. He has signed 2 bills, and so one of those was to study this. And so we had, so they've created this committee, unelected people. However, the chair is one of the legislators who put forth the bill, one of the bills, and that's Tan Parker, Representative Tan Parker, who's also running for a Senate seat, Congress. And so this work study, a bunch of moms just across Texas showed up at that hearing, and we gave some powerful testimonies, which Alison has clipped out some of those, and then she also recorded the whole thing. But it's also on the Texas legislature website. And some poignant testimonies from parents, and these mostly mothers were concerned about putting children on blockchain, which they're doing in Dallas. And Alison mentioned, these are the two states that are. She mentioned California, but Texas is also, as far as the total population. Texas is a target, because if you can take Texas and California, then you can take the nation. And because Dallas educates supposedly 1/10 of, Texas educates 1/10 of the nation's kids, and Dallas ISD has roughly 140, I think it's 142,000 students. It's one of the largest districts in the state. The idea is that low-hanging fruit of the captive market of public school kids do blockchain wallets to store their transcripts, their vaccine history, and their mental health data, which is being collected through an app. All of this is one blockchain company that's running on IBM Hyperledger Fabric. And so the concern is they get it in the public school kids, and then it will be scaled statewide, and then, of course, nationwide, which I've found reports citing Dallas, what's happening in Dallas ISD and with our community colleges. And that is to be scaled nationwide through the Department of Education. So that's Texas in a nutshell.
Well, and in Austin, they already have a blockchain identity program for unhoused people, right? The ID 2020. Yes. They were putting medical records of unhoused people in Austin on blockchain with QR code identity. So that
Correct.
use case is in place already in Texas.
And you and I, of course, have issues with that. And however, they are adults. Is there informed consent? Probably not. I don't know the answer to that. But there's still major issues with it, because it's taking people who are desperate for services, and you force them into a system where if they want food, clothing, shelter, and opportunities, then they have to submit to this. And what we're seeing in the captive market of public school kids is there's not informed consent. And one company, which is a for-profit company, did this deal. And actually the founder of this company showed up to the hearing, which was interesting. And he spoke at, even though he was the first one there, he spoke at the end, which I thought was, it was curious how his card was pulled last. But maybe he wanted to be the closer. I don't know.
So one of the things, as I was watching, it seemed clear that the task force did not, they were fairly receptive, right? Like it went on for about 3.5 hours. They did not seem very well informed about the role of blockchain in the educational space. Is that, would you say that's accurate? They didn't seem to be adding their own insights into it. So this seemed to be new information.
Yes, and they would say, "Oh, we're not for that in education," but then they would also argue, "Well, do you have a problem with data privacy?" Or there were questions asked. So some of them were in the education space. One is a professor at SMU, but for the most part, they were more interested in the tokenized economies and Bitcoin blockchain to store Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin mining. Energy was mentioned. So they see it as a separate issue. But you and I know what's happening with, and I cited this, Cardano, what the guy Charles Hoskinson mentioned in Ethiopia, where they put 5 million children on blockchain and to be scaled across the nation. So they want that to be, 100 million? 100 million people, I think is what he said. And so I tried to help them understand the parallels there, because it would encompass not just their education, but their work, all their skills and badges and credentials for work. And it said they would have to earn, they could earn the right to work. And then it also mentioned voting, which that's been thrown around big time in Texas about having blockchain voting, which would supposedly, make secure elections, because election fraud and secure elections is a huge debate going on across the country. But Texas is really, there are lots of advocates for blockchain voting as this panacea to fix our voting issues, our voter issues.
As I was watching, and I know that during the course of the day, because there's such a learning curve on this, Lynn, I mean, and people are coming along. I mean, I was really impressed by how many parents really took the initiative to take the information that you had shared earlier and then do their own research and build their own knowledge base. That is incredible. Like, that's what I've been hoping for all along. So that was really impressive. I would say when they kept trying to point out, is your problem blockchain or is it something else, right? And they kept sort of, what we've seen is they would like to set up privacy or some of these things as the focal point, when really for me, and I think for you as well, once you understand that the plan is to create through a digital identity, whether that be blockchain or some other interoperable database, or slap some other name on it, that is the idea of this interoperability that they can then use to collect all sorts of data on you, to mirror your behaviors and your activities and even your biological function into the metaverse, and then to start running simulations, right? And the people who are behind these simulations, like Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, even industry have cited that there are ethical concerns once the twin models get so far developed and everything becomes a cyber physical system with sensors, that you could run an algorithm on a simulation on a digital twin and then throughput information to sensors that we interact with, whether that's your car, whether that's your credit card, whether that's the Internet of Things bike that you might rent, to actually nudge you and remake the real material world you in the vein of the twin. And you may not even be aware of it, and it may not be happening with your consent. And so that's one of the things that I feel like I would love to see a follow-up discussion with some of those same people, is the whole concept of the twinning, which I know is very prominent in Dallas right now, because they want to twin not only individuals, but entire social systems and smart cities. And I think Dallas has been set up to be that.
Yeah, and I think people have a difficult time making the jump to that. But as you and I know, when you hear the term metaverse, that sounds like this, okay, that's this thing out there. Right now I can see the sky and the trees and the walls, and I'm not in the metaverse. I'm not going to, how am I going to, you're not going to put me in the metaverse. But we can see clear examples of pilots, even in Dallas ISD. They have a whole metaverse campus. The students they're in the metaverse a few days a week, and then they're in the physical campus the other days of the week, and they have an avatar, and the digital twinning is being set up through their education. These are you'll see on the walls of the metaverse classroom and the campus, because you and I have seen the simulation, the videos they put out, is that you'll see IBM and these companies that are sponsoring this. And the idea behind this metaverse is these students will go through, and these are elementary students, and they will go through this and they will develop these skills to be ready for the workforce. Meanwhile, they're missing out on the fundamentals that you and I, that we all received in reading, writing, math, science, the basics, which a lot of those things are being they're thrown by the wayside, because the importance now is your digital badges and your credentials and your workforce training that is being pushed down lower and lower grades. And we wonder why our students, they're struggling with just holding basic attention spans. And so when you talk about the metaverse, people think that's, quit worrying about the future. That's not really a real threat, but we know it is. Virtual learning, having the headsets, stepping into that virtual reality. It's happening all over the place with our kids on video games. And they're now increasingly bringing that into the classroom.
Yeah, and I also think the big giant headsets also kind of throw people off too, because I mean, ultimately at the end of the end game is for us to have wearable technologies, whether it's glasses, and it won't be as quite as obnoxious as these giant glasses. So that's like, nobody's going to wear those big old things, like, but that it in a way that kind of prevents people from actually like seeing what's where we're headed,
It seems so far-fetched, but if you look at the history of how long they've been working at it, how long they've been working on personalized learning assistants and digital education and the idea of virtualization, most of it started in the late 1990s. So for the people who've been working on it for 20 plus years, it doesn't seem brand new. I mean, it doesn't, in fact, I'm sure that they wished it would go faster, but this hasn't just emerged within the last handful of years. It's something that is a very long trajectory, but unless you're working in that industry, you would not be aware. And I would say, hazard a guess, most people working in those spaces to build these things operate in a bubble of their coworkers who are all being paid on these contracts. Many of them have underlying military origins, because these are training programs for soldiers, a lot of them, the HoloLens and all of that. They're gamification for simulations for military operations that they wouldn't think anybody might have a problem with it, right? They can't contextualize it because I think the people who are so deeply immersed in building it, they can't imagine that there might be anyone who wouldn't think that's the best idea ever.
Right. And many operate in some sort of niche space. And so they're not putting the pieces together, which I think we had a lot of comments that I observed. And I called it mansplaining because it was mostly men who would say, no, you don't understand what you're talking about. Very condescending. That happened multiple times throughout the day. And the thing is, we actually do know what we're talking about because we're not in this narrow lane thinking that we're doing nothing wrong. We're looking at thinking that they're doing nothing wrong. We're looking at the total picture. And when it comes to the kids, it needs to be carefully considered. And they're not. That what really was, I think they were somewhat blindsided by the overwhelming testimonies of parents saying, hold up, I don't want my kids on this system because this idea that it's decentralized is really comical because it actually centralizes power to a handful of companies who get first dibs on this. They get no bid contracts. They get sole source deals. Oh, because no one else can do this for us. They will pick that particular vendor. And if that particular vendor gets access to all of those, interoperable, data points, then we do have a huge problem.
And who was it that says you want to be the one to write the rules? I remember one of your clips, Alison.
Oh, Kevin Werbach.
Kevin Werbach
at Wharton, yeah. Be the game designer. Be the one who makes the rules. That way you can always win.
When I say games, you probably think about some of the things like what I just showed you. You probably don't think about work. You probably don't think about school. And you probably don't think about your business interactions as a consumer in the marketplace. But maybe you should. The games have been designed effectively to motivate people to play them. And that is why games and gamification are potentially such a valuable area for business because motivation is such a central thing to all kinds of business interactions. It's not building games. It's building game-like elements into existing processes and activities, and the term for that is gamification. Someone who designs video games or other designs has a particular attitude towards what they're designing. Their goal is to get people to play, to get you to start playing and to get you to keep playing. And to design the rules of the game in ways that encourage that kind of engagement. Because it's very different to think like a game designer versus thinking like a game player. As a player, you're experiencing the game, you're not making the rules. As a game designer, you're designing the system to engage people, to make them feel like the activity is fun. So pretty much every department at Wharton ties into this concept of gamification. It's partly about some of these creative aspects like design, but it's also related to marketing and management, operations. There's even some legal and ethical dimensions to it as well. They all tie together around this idea of motivation, around using these insights from game design to encourage people to do things and to find them more fun and engaging. The rules matter. And the rules can be surprising. Again, when you're playing a game, you don't necessarily know what the rules are. You're just responding to them and interacting with the experience that's been created by the game designer. So the lesson that I take away and the message that I give to students in this area is be the designer. Be the one who makes the rules.
Do you remember with all of the Enron stuff? I remember there was all this talk about deregulation, and they wanted to deregulate so that they could create the rules as they went along. I know I was watching that with the smartest guys in the room. It's kind of the same idea, because you have those who are saying, oh no, we need to get rid of the middleman. And I always say, that's us. They're trying to get rid of us and the jobs all these little middlemen hold. And so then we could just do business to business, peer to peer, each person with sharing their information however they want, as if we're going to own this. But I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but it is comical, the arguments that they give, because it's because they want to create the rules for their benefit, for this new fiat, or what do they want to call this system that benefits them, and they act like it will open up possibilities for all. I mean, you see this a lot with, they'll say, oh, this gives everyone access, or this levels the playing field for everyone. Everyone can participate in this system, but it's still a very homogenous group that is putting this forward. At least in Texas, that's what I'm seeing. And I saw it at the Mormon Transhumanism conference that we went to. We all attended earlier in the year. It's a lot of young white dudes, really.
I was just thinking they don't want to get rid of all the middlemen, because you think about, like, if you go and talk to a city council or whatever, you're not actually talking to the people behind it. They're just people that are presenting it and then rubber stamp it or whatever. So, they're in a way, they're kind of the middlemen to, like, be a buffer. So, you know what I mean? Like, how responsive are these people? Like, they're just repeating what they've been told that this is what it is. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of actual agency on their part, like individual agency. It's like
no, and they feel like they're making decisions, but really they're kind of what's happening is really going beyond. And a lot of these are public-private partnerships, so it skirts the elected bodies anyway.
Right. It's like going into a store and complaining to the clerk behind the counter about the company policy. As if they made it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would say too, once you understand the idea is to securitize and tokenize people on blockchain, and that's what I would love to see presented in a public forum, is Nicholas Bergruen, who is deeply connected with the interests that are advancing this California trust network. And he's looking to remake capitalism, democracy, and foundationally what it means to be human. He's a billionaire financier based in Los Angeles, but he had a tweet, a short thread last year where he said, individual lives should be considered assets and that could be tokenized on blockchain. And his conclusion would be then that would be how you would underwrite UBI and those sorts of things, which again, I think if Texas understood that what they were being sold was the exact same package as California, like that would probably not fly. I mean, it might fly better in California that you could tokenize for UBI, but if you came into Texas and said, by the way, we're going to blockchain your children so that they can have some sort of token allowance and then be the pets of artificial intelligence, people would be like, no, I don't think so. I mean, that's what they're thinking, but they're not in the right story. They're in we're liberty, innovation, free market story. And they don't realize it's the same story as your kids are going to be tokenized. And so once you understand that once they're tokenized, that becomes part of high frequency trading in human capital, right? High frequency trading is not human. The things that are doing those trades are fundamentally not human. And those computers, like the one that undergirds BlackRock, Aladdin, you do not want to feed your children to Aladdin. You don't want to, if you're a charitable person, if you're a member of the, you have a faith practice, you don't want to feed vulnerable people to Aladdin. But no one's going to tell you that. Their hope is that no one tells that story effectively in time. And I think that's what we're trying to bring, is that story.
Well, I was encouraged. I've been attending these. It's a series of talks and panels on blockchain, and I'm actually going to host one at our Chamber of Commerce here in Dallas, but that'll be in July. But I went to one, and we do get a lot of questions from the audience because their minds can go there. Okay, so if you're not having a physical person to talk to, what they're really asking is, who can I gripe out if I don't get the service that I need? Who do I talk to? And I mean, those are just some of the issues that are what do I do if my token is not accurately representing some badge or skill that I have, or it says that I don't have, or how do you reconcile that? And because the idea is this is an immutable ledger, and that once it's set out there, it can't be changed. And so I don't know the answer to that. I don't really care, because I don't want to get there to begin with. The other thing is, you mentioned BlackRock, and you and I talked about this on the phone, Alison, a few days ago, that BlackRock actually manages the investments through the Texas Education Agency. And I'm sure they do other state agencies across the country, but that's just something to note. And then when you look at our Texas Education Agency commissioner, he has engaged in something that it's with DataKind, Microsoft Azure, Strive Together, and the Commit Partnership, and they're doing machine learning, AI, and predictive analytics based on student test scores and student data that has been given to them, that they've uploaded millions of student level records. And so they don't say exactly what they're doing. They're trying to predict the outcomes of students based on their scores at this level, this level, this level. But you helped me understand why that predictive model does feed into this future of not just the tokenized economy, because they're reducing the student competencies and the teacher competencies to digital badges and tokenized learning and achievements, but also
behaviors.
You were talking about the mirrored behaviors. Yes, that's social emotional learning, which our commissioner has been a big proponent of. Talked about it early on before he was appointed, and he was appointed by the governor, who's the governor Abbott, who is pushing Texas to be a leader in blockchain, trying to beat Wyoming.
So yeah, Alison, blockchain and hybridized life, Pegasus Park, Greenlight, Datazone, and digital twinning.
Yeah. So, in addition to wanting to uplift the idea of blockchain being used for the twinning, there's also the element of it being used for globalized labor, right? These tokens that AI will decide based on what's tokenized in your learning locker. The vending machine AI will allow you the chance to try to compete for a job. That's a big element. And then the other piece is that increasingly your biological data will be also compounded into your digital twin. So the thing that I thought was very interesting when I came out in the fall, and we had our eye on it most of last year, was the development of Pegasus Park in Dallas, that it was this new, a renovated complex. It was the Exxon company, I believe, formerly, large complex of industrial businesses, office park, odd space. It was the filming location for Logan's Run in part. And we went out there because it was under construction last fall. I'm not sure how far it's progressed, but the tenants,
I haven't been there lately.
This space, their intention was that it was going to be educational technology affiliates and biotechnology. And so when this was first announced, a couple years ago, we thought, okay, so how do these two things interface, both the biotech and the ed tech? We're not shocked that they do, because I think in some ways we've looked at the protocols at the no excuses charter schools, the KIPP charter schools. They're like, wow, they're trying to make kids be like robots, and so to collect the data through maybe a community school interface model, a wraparound service model, it isn't that far a reach. But I wanted to revisit that in terms of some of the work I've been doing around biocomputing and photonics. Strangely, is centered on Rochester. So that's why I have Hybridized Life, because like I said, Jason, you guys are working on consolidating this knowledge base, and I've run off to the next thing. And I will say a lot of this actually has been informed by a number of other people who are doing work in this space. My friend Steffers at A Piece of Mindful, another woman, her name is Jen Lake, and she has a blog called Polio Forever. She's been looking at the radiological and medical aspects, and Raul Diego and Leo Saraceno, who are both doing work in the blockchain space. So all of us together, we have sort of this small crew that we bounce ideas off of each other. So I want to just put that out there initially, that this isn't all coming out of like a mind, this is a larger mind meld among a collective, more of a natural mind meld, hopefully, than a blockchain tokenized one. So
we're like
that's why I
super friends.
Life. Super friends, right? So the hybridized life is the thing beyond. So beyond digital twinning, beyond globalized labor, now we actually have synthetic biology as part of the educational process. And these slides, it's sort of a placeholder. This is an image of the chamber. This is Lynn giving her testimony. And again, we can put a link into there, but it's on my YouTube channel, Lynn section, which was about 15 minutes, I think, because they did kind of push you with a number of questions about privacy, because they do want to frame it as a privacy argument. Lynn, they're just really trying to help people keep their data private, which I will say, in a world run by smart contracts, privacy doesn't help you at all. Privacy doesn't help you with digital twinning, and it doesn't help you with smart contracts. And then below there, that is the Nippon Telegraph and Telephone page on the value creation of human digital twins.
But can I get some credit for always turning my 2 or 3 minutes into 15? Which
You're good.
That's always a win if I can get them to, dialogue back and forth. It's like, yes, they don't like it when you come presenting evidence of things that they don't want to see. So
did you feel like anybody on that board there was like it was connecting at all, or?
I did. I think, Alison, would you agree that some of them at times, you could tell it was forcing them into I guess it's that cognitive dissonance, it's a struggle, but not, as a whole, I don't think we were given much in the way of, okay, you're right. You're right. We should carefully consider this. It was more like, oh, we don't want to do that in education. None of it. We agree. But then they would go to argue the privacy thing. And it's just, anyway, I don't know what you have to say about that, Alison, your observation.
I think the very fact that you got a hearing, like that it happened, was a plus, and I think it is, you had said in the past, based on your normal experience in Austin, it was actually one of the more dynamic and engaged.
It was. You're exactly right.
Not waiting for it to be open over,
Yeah.
I do think that if these are the people who have been chosen based on their expertise, or perceived expertise, to be on the task force for blockchain in one of the key states in blockchain rollout. And if you can go into that space and the fact that they're not weighted with the use case scenarios in human capital management, whether that be in the healthcare space or the education space or the social welfare space, to me, that just shows how narrow the conversation is in the crypto space entirely. They are centering it primarily around financial transactions and economic productivity, but not understanding that the new economy is the data economy, which means it is a total surveillance economy, and that is built on the backbone of the metaverse and augmented reality is foundational to that, is track and trace permanent, because they can't give you your augmented reality unless they know exactly where you are at any given point in time. Now,
yeah, and I did.
And that's how the augmented reality works. Like, you would think that they would understand that. And yet no one is having the more robust conversation to say, well, if we agree to augmented reality, it essentially means that we live in a panopticon run by AI. And how comfortable are we with that for ourselves and for our children? And very few people are having that conversation. And I can't imagine that the people in that room don't know. It's just how the story is told to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tried to explain, you may unknowingly be ushering in something that is like a total surveillance economy. I didn't say it quite like that, but that was what I mean, they don't know what they don't know. And so it's important for them to see. And I talked about the unintended consequences, because that's largely what I've been doing at the legislature for the last several years, is showing them, you think this bill is going to, like a character trait bill. Okay, well, kids don't have, they're not displaying good character, and their behavior is it leaves much to be desired. So let's embed character traits in our curriculum. Well, they don't understand that once you do that, then you're testing the attitudes, the behaviors, the values of kids, and that can be used then to feed into this. This mirrored behavior that you're talking about in this future. So they don't see that. They're just following it's like they're in lockstep responding to something. It's like that nudge theory, and they don't even know that they're doing it. They mean well, but they're setting up something far different than what they intend. So I'm constantly pointing out the unintended consequences, because we had, of the 7,000 bills, more than half were education bills. That tells me our kids are a huge target. It's the bulk of where our taxes go, is to fund the schools. And so they want access to the dollars, the data, the students, and then this, to feed this model that most people don't even put the pieces together to see where it's going. So yeah, it's a big beast. And before you go on to that, I want to say that that parents get overwhelmed with this, and it's real simple. You make Swiss cheese out of their data. You starve them of the access to your kids by starving them of the technologies that feed the system. Very difficult to do in this day and age. It takes a really deliberate, it's a daily battle, especially when you have young boys who want to be on the video games and their friends are doing this. Right. The girls, the chats, the way that they communicate now is so highly, virtual and technical and digital. So it takes a lot of planning, and parenting is increasingly difficult in this world. So I'll just say that.
And so this is just some context, because Lynn, when we first connected, I don't know 5 years ago or so, around school, at the time what I understood was school privatization. Mm-hmm. And I think we had experienced school closures and weaponized data against kids, and my goodness, we had no idea what was on the horizon, right? Like, things that were well underway for 20 years, we had no clue what we didn't know. And that's why I can't have empathy for people who don't know things, because and I'm sure there's many, many things still in this unfolding puzzle that we don't know yet. But I just wanted to revisit back to, this is a bit of my work around Rochester, centered on Mark Tucker. And I think many people who are active in conservative circles and like reading Charlotte Iserbyt's like Dumbing Down of America, and I think that's something that's sort of circulated more in the Texas space, is that like people are coming in to target America for this. And yet Mark Tucker, who is based in Rochester with the National Center on Education and the Economy, he was funded by Carnegie. And the Carnegie Corporation, they made the seat time requirements to make the kids be in school, to train us, to be the people they needed us to be. And now they're going to take the schools apart and send them out and turn it into Pokemon Go education, because the new economy demands data. And that's how you get the data, is to set the kids loose out of school with devices and have them run around and perform tasks and feed the machine learning. And so within Rochester, it's quite interesting because they're also a city of LRNG. Now, Philadelphia is a city of LRNG and Dallas is a city of LRNG. And that was a program out of the MacArthur Foundation's Collective Shift, where kids would earn badges and do this badge-based education. And so later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about imaging and photonics, but it turns out that Rochester, beyond being the headquarters of this National Center on Education and the Economy, which has since relocated to Washington, Tucker retired, and he was replaced by a guy from Australia who was connected with OECD. So it's going global. But it was the Center for Kodak and Xerox. And it's been and Bausch and Lomb. So the city of Rochester has been a center of image, film, copying. And so when we understand it in the nature of digital twinning and optics, and now increasingly within the past decade, photonic computing, that's where it's going to interface with the biotechnology sphere. And so I just wanted to sort of put a pin on that our early understanding. And again, you almost need a scaffold of all of these things to understand what's happening against this backdrop. It wasn't simply workforce-based education. It wasn't simply that the Business Roundtable wants to engineer your child, like Tom Luce said, we just like to have the kids from preschool up through college. How convenient. Then the companies can groom and handpick the cream of the crop of their people, right? It wasn't ever just about that. It was about hooking it into a that would feed these twins. And then eventually they'll have it so seamless that it's not you interfacing with the device or even a clunky headset, but literally there will be biophotonic computing in which your bioelectrical energy systems are interacting and interfacing with this Internet of Bio-Nano things.
And I noticed these videos are from 86 and 87. So again, like the long plan.
It's a long time horizon, yeah. And I think that's the thing that really hits me is that people keep saying, well, not everybody can be on it. How can everybody be on it? And I'm like, what they're doing. They're just given a job and they just do their job. And they get reinforcement for doing their job well. And there's no incentive to actually scale back and say, wow, if you look at the trajectory here and you imagine logically where the progression is, they're talking holographic life. They're talking about having us interact on a regular basis with holograms, expecting that somehow that's not going to impact our mental health and well-being. I lost you.
Did we lose you?
Frozen.
Yeah, you're frozen. There we go. Didn't Disney have a movie about that?
Okay. I don't know how much.
Yeah, I was babysitting my my nieces and nephew, and there was a show on where the kid was it was a hologram, and so I mean all of this has been imagined, regardless of whether it's happening or not. But you have done the research to show that this has been in the works for a very long time.
Yeah, again, the long trajectory. The top image was actually from February of 2020. It's a Simpsons episode that someone shared with me that was called The Miseducation of Lisa Simpson. And it aired on February 6th of 2020. So we're like 5 weeks out from the lockdowns. And what it shows is Lisa, who's in the gifted class, is going down to the basement, the race to the bottom, where the subpar labor is doing haptic remote robotic work. And Bart, who feels really good about excelling in school now, like because he loves these games and he's winning all the badges and the new skins to wear, is picking up Internet of Things scooters off the streets and recharging them, and that is their quote unquote learning experience. And later there's remote Lyft drivers and remote grocery store checker outers. And, Lisa comes and she's trying to tell people this isn't fair that only a small group of people get real jobs. They're training you for gigs. They're training you to work for the app. And within this, Lynn, we had to, when you see the whole episode, it opens with a musical piece with John Legend. And at the time, I I did not realize that John Legend was a Penn graduate. I remembered he'd spoken at one of our graduations, the graduations here, but he was a Penn graduate and won a Wharton Entrepreneurship Award. I think he was a college graduate, but Wharton, embraced him. And so there were some connections between, I think, Teach for America and Greenlight and Dallas. And it turns out that John Legend had connections to LRNG, which is this badge-based education, which is exactly what they're representing in this video, comically. And I will say my husband, who trusts me and understands that I'm doing good work, it wasn't until he saw this short video that he's like, oh yeah, okay. And then it became real, or it became legitimate because it's on The Simpsons. Like, that's how culture wars work. Like, oh, okay, well, if Bart is doing remote robotic
Well, you know what's so weird about all of this? The whole thing is just bizarre. I mean, I had to about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or so, I had to just compile it all together so my brain can process it. And a lot of times when I do that, I'll put it into a post because then I can go back and reference it based on keywords. And so I do it mostly for myself, but I'll share it with those who can hear me. And I would always, when we were talking about this Greenlight contract with Dallas ISD, that song that John Legend wrote was always in my head. Give me the green light, and he would do the well, anyway, I'm not going to sing it, but that song would always come through my head. And I've been exposing this in Dallas College, which is our local community college. There was this huge contract with BCG, Boston Consulting Group, $18 million. This is a community college. And they paid the consultants in order to consolidate the different community colleges into one. And so, but then I remembered years ago my husband telling me that Legend worked for BCG. And so I started putting all these pieces together and thinking, okay, so then there was the Teach for America thing. I know I've followed that for years because the founder, Wendy Kopp, she grew up not too far from me in Highland Park. And she was the founder of Teach for America. The story goes that she had this idea when she was in school, and she came up with this. This was part of her thesis or some sort of graduation. And so she pitched it, and she pitched it to Ross Perot, and that was her big funder. Well, come to find out, the one of the founders of Greenlight is the son-in-law of Ross Perot. So I'm going, you can't make this stuff up. I don't even know how to process all this, but, Ross Perot, EDS, Electronic Data Systems, so it's just north of me. And so, yeah, it's noteworthy, for whatever it's worth. It's noteworthy.
I need to take this Simpsons video and just superimpose Alison's face over Lisa's.
I might be Bart. I don't know who I am. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And then just underneath, there's an image that I had on hand. It's a humanoid robotic conference from 2000 at MIT. So again, even in 2000, they were working on the remote robotics because robots aren't really smart. I mean, even sophisticated robots are pretty dumb, and I think they like to play that up. But what their goal is that they want us to put our minds into the robots through this haptic work. And the thing that I'm very concerned about with normalizing that, beyond the economic implications of race to the bottom and no labor protection, right? They want to sell STEM careers as, your job security, right? Your leg up. We're going to address equity and justice by giving Black and brown kids STEM jobs. Well, people are not paying attention to the broader context because the plan is that education will be standardized around the entire world, and so that the AI can sort, and there will be automated natural language processing. So for any given job that can be done either through a hologram or through a remote robot or through an online platform, there's going to be competition for people all over the world to do that job for the lowest price with the highest reputation score. There will be some calculus of reputation score against what you will charge. And those jobs will be very short term, a day, a week, a month. And that's precarity, and that will keep everyone indebted and probably tied into this UBI program, right? There may be some compulsion that you have to participate in order to continue to get a basic income. So we need to understand that as we put our minds in the robots, we are training the robots to be more and more human, and we are losing our humanity in the process. And all of that runs on blockchain. Now, I would have a little bit more respect for these blockchain task force working groups if they actually were willing to grapple with that part of the story. Like if they actually were willing to grapple with it and say, wow, we have some concerns, but these are the guardrails we're putting in place. This is how this future isn't going to happen because we understand how terrible that would be. These are the treaties we're making around global labor to make sure that our children don't end up just run into the ground and disposed of as robot wranglers, but they're not. And to me, that makes me question.
No, I'll tell you why they're not.
The entire academic system, because these are people who should know better, and they're not. Sorry.
But see, they won't acknowledge that because acknowledging it is like they believe that will get a foothold and sabotage their efforts, and so they won't do that. I've learned that in other issues that I've been battling in Texas. Whether it's the charter schools, they will ignore the ones that are taking money and sending it overseas, because if they acknowledge that, then their pet charter won't make it, and they believe that will sabotage their pet charter. So they're afraid you're going to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. Well, they're right. They're right. Actually.
Well, when it's Rosemary's Baby, sometimes you gotta.
I was Rosemary's Baby.
But it could be a blockchain baby. Yeah. Oh, actually, I just figured out I'm not Bart Simpson. I'm the little one with the pacifier with it. Is like the baby. Because I always tell Alison, I'm like, I understand you. I just can't repeat it yet because I'm like a toddler trying to process all the things that I'm learning from you.
You can both be Lisa, because in the metaverse, you can actually share avatars.
Perfect.
Just Pegasus Park. This is one of the images. I thought that this was a useful headline. They use this image all the time because when we actually went there, Lynn, it was a wreck. It didn't look nearly that nice. It's kind of a dated, odd building to begin with, but it was the construction was not well executed, I will have to say. But they're framing this economy, right? Data extraction. It's just like the oil industry. It's just like big oil. And they literally call health wildcatters, right? That they are going to but as if the thing they're mining isn't bodies and minds. I mean, it's kind of crazy that the disconnect.
Yeah. Social impact and biotech hub. That is what they call it. And they call it a water cooler, a meeting of minds there. And they're all going to hang out at the water cooler and talk about all these wonderful things that they're imposing on us through the biosecurity state and this I don't know, this future, the metaverse future that none of us really wants.
Well, it's interesting, the water cooler framing too, because the more I understand about photonics and the way in which biological systems may be transmitting and communicating information through light and refraction, the idea of structured water and this fourth phase of water working in tandem with the DNA, the DNA spiral structure, like the two-stranded DNA, is quite interesting. And there are some, there are investigations, but at this point, they're sidelined because they need to make life something that is computable in a certain way. That's very reductive, all of this CRISPR, but there's huge pieces that are missing to the equation. And the water in the cells and the structured water is a huge piece of that. So to me, and we'll show an image later of the helix that's been designed into the landscaping there, but the helix in some ways that people are now looking at things doesn't actually function without the structured water. So the fact that they've, sometimes they're imprinting these ideas with how they represent themselves in the media, which I think is important.
Yeah. Logan's Run. I'm gonna have to find that photo. I'll have to find that photo of you, Lynn. Send me a high resolution of that photo because I might throw that up here.
Oh,
That was just
of Lynn's run.
Lynn's run. That was perfect.
And the funniest thing about that is that my mom was hired to be an extra in the movie in the 70s because it was filmed in Dallas, and so she was excited about it. And then they told her that she'd have to wear a mini toga and she wasn't allowed to wear anything under it. And so she was like, okay, no thanks. So she rejected she says, we're very modest. And she's like, nope, I'm out.
Well, can you just give a summary of the movie, Lynn, and why the significance maybe of the building being there?
So, yes. So Logan and they live in this panopticon, and so they've got a model of the city that they pan out and show at times. And you have you have a bullet train, all these things that they're talking about doing in Dallas, which is kind of funny. But so everything's perfect. They don't have to worry about labor and all these menial jobs. They can just live in complete pleasure. And there's only one catch: you can't leave. And so Logan and the girl, I can't remember her name, but they break out, and you see America in ruins and all of these iconic, these landmarks, like in DC. They end up in DC, and all these landmarks are overgrown, and you're not allowed to. Well, I say everyone dies at 30. They don't know they die. They think they're being elevated to another level. And so they have a celebration in this carousel. The people are like spectators and like a gladiator, type of event. And the people who are reaching 30 years old, they go up, they float up, and they combust once they get up there. And so it's set in the 23rd century, but it was interesting. They're all born with that jewel that you can see, the gem. They're born with a gem in their hands, and it once they expire at 30, it turns red. And so, there's just a lot of symbolism in the way that we will be tracked and traced. A lot of people talk about having some sort of ID or chip or something in your hands. Who knows what's coming, but you're not allowed to leave, and that's when Alison talks about geofencing and not being we're in an open air prison is what they're building, and so that you can see a lot of parallels there with the movie, and so it's just kind of funny. But not funny, actually. It's not funny at all. But I was making a parody, really just mocking the movie and saying, no, I don't want blockchain. I don't want this future that you're imposing. And so I did this fun kind of photo shoot, and they said, oh, well, everyone can bring whatever costume they want. So I went to Joann's Fabric and I got my own costume and put a gem in my hand. And then my mom kept saying, take that picture down. That's scary. You're scaring people. They don't understand what you're doing, because out of context, it is kind of scary, because I'm a candidate for I'm running for the local Dallas college where they're imposing this blockchain future. And so she's like, people aren't going to vote for you if they see that. That's strange, but it's really a resistance movement is what it is.
Love it.
I thought it was great. Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's quite interesting because, again, it's sort of like on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, that preference. Like, when you have these beautiful architectural renderings of this biotech center, you would have no idea that when you show up, it's actually like all falling down and messy, And to me, I'm still trying to sort of figure out how that choice was made to center this biotech hub and education hub on that location, because it was a campus that, like, it's on a lot of acreage. There's a stream that goes nearby. There's a lot of landscaping and built environment down by that stream bed that hasn't been maintained. That's incredibly expensive to upgrade. Like, they would have to put a lot of money in to bring it back up to any sort of like quality standard. It's not old Parkland, right? Like the visual at the ethos there, it's quite a contrast between like this very pristine place and a place that's just really all over the place. And so I'm still trying to figure out what is the significance beyond the film is there of choosing, of doing that building, because it doesn't necessarily come off either visually or in person as high-end office space, like as prestige office space, which seems to be what they would want to convey, because there are very influential organizations, including the Draper Foundation is in there, some movers and shakers. So it doesn't quite add up.
President, we've got a disgraced president of the Federal Reserve who just stepped down from his position as the president. He's a Goldman guy. He's known Todd Williams and the founder of Commit's moving into the Pegasus Park, but he's known him for 30 years from the Goldman days, and he has that nonprofit Draper Kaplan Richards, and so they're moving in there. I don't know the significance of the property, but I think you nailed it just with the oil, the history in big oil. I think that's the significance for me. And if data and our bodies and all of that are to be mined, and then the water significance, which the water cooler, I think that's significant too. We're dealing in realms that I don't understand at all. It's
though in your gut.
I do. Oh, for me, it's just good versus evil in a spiritual battle, and this is it's wanting to access the hearts, souls, minds of children and people, and force them into this total surveillance economy. But beyond that, I don't know. Why there?
So what was that? Originally there was a mall there, right? And then it was offices and
the Exxon. Actually, it was Zales Diamonds. So this is also interesting. I think it was the Zales headquarters, and then Zales became important, I think, in manufactured diamonds. And when you look at what's coming with the nano, their goal is to come up with a molecular assembler. Is it Zyvex? Is in maybe Richardson? These early nano fabrication. They imagine in their head that they will be able to create something in a computer-aided design system and then have some fabrication happen that will manifest itself from molecules, like custom on-demand stuff, way beyond 3D printing at a nano level. And that material is diamondis or something like that. And actually it was reflected in Neil Stephenson's book, The Diamond Age. That was the reference, was to this nanomolecular assembly, and Merkel, and I can't remember the other guy, but there are ties to Richardson in that. So the fact that it was Zales Diamond, and then it went on to Exxon, I feel is significant. And then, the reclamation. And a lot of what I'm seeing with this photonic computing and biomedical sensing is it's crystalline. It's about crystallography. And, it's so funny because I'm not really a new agey kind of person. I was never I like rocks. Actually, when I was a kid, I remember in our suburb, there was a little creek with, riprap and these rocks had quartz in it, and we would just spend afternoons in the summer looking for good quartz crystals. So maybe I was kind of a crystal kid at the time, but there is something about these crystalline structures that overlap with the geological sciences. And I can see if you're looking at crystallography of the geophysical stuff, that there would be overlap with the people who do oil exploration, because they're geologists, right? They're people who understand mineralogy. And increasingly within this new form of computing, mineralogy and crystallography, I feel are going to be coming to the forefront. So this is just touching on Greenlight. And I think you mentioned it briefly again, that early on, before all the lockdowns, I kind of thought that the blockchain identity rollout was going to be coming through the community college system, I thought it was going to be a slow boil to get people onto blockchain. I thought, okay, Bernie, they're going to sell free college and dual enrollment and affordable college, and that's how they'll hook you into getting a blockchain transcript. And looking at what Learning Machine was doing, and then Dallas having the Greenlight credentials, which is backed by these major investors, right? I mean, like JP Morgan is part of Dallas County Promise, and it's all baked into the United Way in this sort of, social uplift program. So I just wanted to put that out, Lynn. And if you have any more thoughts on Greenlight, and I know you had shared with me before this image of the hand, the human hand and the robot hand, and the significance of that in the biomedical human plus context.
Well, it's interesting. You've used the term uplift twice, and that is the name of the charter that is there, which is kind of funny. But regarding the community college, there was a lot of controversy around Dr. Jill Biden, because you have to call her doctor because of her work with her. Her thesis was on community colleges. And so that's significant. And she came to Dallas and did. So she is friends with the former chancellor of Dallas College. And so she gave the commencement speech. Actually, I think it was virtually. But they're closely connected. That chancellor was the one who supposedly, according to the founder of Greenlight, he was the one who proposed this idea to have the transcripts on blockchain for Dallas College. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that was most of it. But Lynn, can you speak to, it's not just their academics, correct? I mean, the Greenlight is interested in a lot more robust data that would follow along the lines of what we've been saying about the twinning and the prediction markets for social impact finance. Like the mental health
Well, it
data.
can also store it can store medical and vaccine history, and we know how that could be used to where you if you don't comply with whatever vaccine is required or suggested, then you wouldn't be able to access school and enroll. But the mental health piece is significant because so one of the trustees on Dallas College, he works for the mental health division of Greenlight, which is called Vital Signs 6. And when you think about all your vital signs, the sixth one, is mental health, is what they're saying. So it's a means to survey the kids. The way that they've explained it is as a mental health survey. It's done through your phone. The trustee says, well, everyone has one of these, and they have the mental health survey. So all of that data can be stored and collected along with other healthcare data on the students. And the concern with one company having that much access to so many components of a child's education, they talk about like we saw this, Alison, with the pre-K to gray Silicon Valley panel that had the Dallas players in the blockchain space were on that panel talking about womb to tomb access, cradle to career. They say pre-K to gray blockchain credentialing for students. So it's an enormous opportunity for those who want access to the data. And the Commit partnership that's the nonprofit, they supposedly also, according to some of the articles we've read, they chose Greenlight. So I don't know who it is. Was it Dr. May? Was it Commit? Doesn't matter. They're all in on it. And they're working with the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, as well. The head of the TEA came from Dallas. He was a Dallas ISD trustee.
I'm looking at that Greenlight logo and trying to. I mean, it looks like it could be a switch or something, or a circuit, or like two pills on top of each other. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Well, and with that handshake, that was actually the Cooper Aerobics Center, where it's got the robot and the human hand shaking. That was the graphic that was used on the PR, the puff piece about Greenlight doing a deal with the Cooper Aerobics Center, which is world renowned for its for Kenneth Cooper, and it's this multi-acre campus here in Dallas, and the physical fitness data that they've been collecting for a long time, just on, you had to do the physical fitness report.
Jimmy Carter.
Where you, right. Like, and I was never good at sit-ups, and I'm still not
corn
good
farmer.
Whatever. It was very stressful for us non-athletic kids to do the physical fitness test. But I actually interviewed with them, which is just funny how life comes full circle. And I didn't get that job, but I did interview for that particular job. It was the software that they were using for physical fitness tests in the schools. Just kind of a funny sidebar. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting, both the mental health and the heart. I'll just say, when looking at the Oliver Reiser, this World Brain Evolutionary Initiative, is they kept talking about that at this next phase, it would be accomplished through a heart-brain synthesis. And so I do think that's quite interesting in the space of the development of wearables, the advances in the wearable technologies around the brain, like those brain headband wearables that are being used and were piloted in Dallas with Capital One, with like, oh, make art with your brain, put on this headband and think about art. And you can, then we'll print out a QR coded, thing about your brainwave patterns, but then also your cardio. So if they're collecting this physical fitness data and the cardio data within the digital twinning, how does that fit in with this larger push towards harmonizing of and also mindfulness, right? The mindfulness piece, the meditative mindfulness and the tracking of that as a bioelectrical signature. So this is the site plan of the Pegasus Park in Dallas. And Lynn, there is the office tower and then a couple of low-rise buildings. Again, it's a large spread out campus, but there's landscaping in between. And then the sidewalks actually do have a double helix built in. So this, again, I talked a bit about the digital identity on blockchain and hybridized life, is that I feel like the intention is to assert their rights to our biological functions for computing and profiling purposes. And I've often described this as a colonizing project, literally, or maybe a parasitizing project. But this is something that Steffer shared with me earlier today, which is a clip from the Jubilee celebration. And it's the Queen who has been presented with this Commonwealth globe. And then when she places her hand on the globe, it sparks essentially a light show that's like a fuse that appears, based on how I look at it, as a 3-stranded DNA that ends up in a structure that is like an aberration of a tree that has been engineered. Like it looks like a tree cage with these branches that are structured like ladders and lanterns. And I feel very much that this feels like an initiation ritual for this photonic life and the celebration of the colonization, not just of human systems, because really what's coming is this effort towards, they call like hollow genome evolution, where microbiomes, microbes, humans, everything within an ecosystem environment relates to each other, and it all becomes computational. So it's this tree of life that is no longer a natural living tree, but is simply an engineered architecture.
Your Majesty, the Commonwealth of Nations globe.
Okay. Wow. That's, I'm just thinking like conquest, empire, they want to conquer life itself. It's colonization of biological lives. It's crazy.
I know, it's so obvious. And the thing is, we've tried to assert is this idea that it's not just humans, although like that's an imperative for us to try to protect humanity, but it's also all of the natural systems, because in these networks, the photonic communication that they're after is how we interact with everything at all scales, at all levels, even including things that maybe people in the West would not consider alive, like crystallines or mountains or things like that, because in this system, it's all computational and they want to log all of it. So yeah, I don't know what the Commonwealth globe is. I'm looking at that globe and I'm like, it doesn't seem like a full globe. So maybe it's just the Commonwealth nations that are on that ball, but in the crown, it's sitting in the crown.
Well, I think it right. And there's so many there's so much symbolism there. Corona, crown, global, world. I mean, that with Commonwealth, is that
Common,
all?
Yeah.
Common, yeah, wealth. I mean, there you can draw all kinds of conclusions what they're declaring there. This is a ritual of sorts, and those of us who know who these people really are, it's no surprise that they're doing this. Most people, they idolize these people, and that's why they get so much attention with all their pomp and circumstance, royalty.
Yeah, I haven't studied, there are people that are really onto the royalty thing, and I've never really, it's kind of one of those esoteric things you can't kind of figure out exactly their role in the world today, because they don't seem, on one hand, it seems almost like their power is almost like theatrics, but they clearly do still have power, and some people would say that they're the ones totally into power. I know it's hard to delve into that, but it's interesting to see these sorts of presentations, and seeing that some might think that they're just irrelevant, and why do we even still have a queen, sort of thing, because it's the parliament. I don't know if that's something that you guys have thoughts on, but I haven't delved too much into it because it seems like difficult to put your finger on.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just a declaration of something that I think it's a ritual. They have to do it in public, and they're telling us without telling us.
Well, I will say that I don't necessarily initially go for the esoterics, because I feel like sometimes that's off-putting for people. I mean, I do feel like there are symbols in the way people represent themselves and their aspirations. So clearly that is an involvement of light and a capture of natural living systems in the form of that tree. It's hard to read that some other way as a crown project. But I will say that the individual, Nicholas Bergruen, who I feel like is a central figure in the California Trust Network legislation, he was a financier billionaire, and actually his family's business was in art dealing and Picasso and Cubist art. He made his money in finance, but when he got out of his financial dealings, he wanted to become a philosopher, and he studied under he sought out two UCLA professors to do that with, and one of them was Brian Copenhaver, and Brian Copenhaver's focus is actually early modern European magic, like the Hermetica. It's not wild stuff. He's a UCLA professor. He has a number of articles in high level philosophical magazines and or journals and publications. So the fact that they're looking, I feel like it's about communications and different kinds of technologies. And some of those technologies are languages that are beyond the written word or the spoken word. They're symbolic. And so this is part of a ritual symbolic imprinting and energetic imprinting of intention. And so, again, the extent to which we can acknowledge and see what is being played out and then have a chance to say, well, we're going to neutralize that intention. Like we have a counter proposal. We have a counter intention that is not to trap the trees in lanterns of light and cages. No. This is a short one as well. And this one, I think Steffers brought to my attention. I've been doing a lot of research into the Manhattan Project. And, my increasing suspicion is that it never actually ended. It just morphed. And that the Cold War was this goal of weaponizing the atmosphere and continuing to pursue radiological precision medicine towards this global mind project. And what Steffers, I'm not sure if it was Steffers or Jen, had pointed out to me that in the explosions at White Sands, the trinitite that came out of that, and again, it's a trinity, Lynn, so that's interesting to think about the rivers, right, is that they created man-made crystals that were not natural. They were called quasi-crystals. And natural crystals have a certain symmetry and what they call periodicity, which is, I guess, a repeat. And the quasi-crystals are offset. Their repeat isn't symmetrical. And this is something that wasn't known to exist until this gentleman, Shechtman, who's I think he's at Technion in Haifa, discovered them in the early 1980s. And then he later won a Nobel Prize for it. But the reason that I feel like this is really important in terms of the crystalline structure and computing is that in the course of talking about this clip, he spins out a replica of what they call an icosahedron, which is a 20-sided crystalline structure that's made up of triangles. And it's one of the 5 platonic solids, and it represents water. And if there's a way of creating these unified icosahedrons to make like a mega water crystalline structure, like 280 something of these icosahedrons, and in terms of structured water. So the fact that he's spinning this icosahedron, and it's also connected to the logo of the National Interoperability Collaborative, which is the health and human service data ocean that they're building out of Datazone, which I feel like is the K-12 equivalent of Greenlight in Dallas. And so I want to draw the connections between those two. But then at the end of this clip, you'll notice there's this little creature. What he says is when he first discovered the crystalline structure that was unexpected, he said something like, that animal, there's no animal like that, or that animal doesn't exist. He said it in Hebrew. And what pops out is this little cartoon character that is like some sort of Sphinx Pegasus creature. And at the end, it's sitting next to him, and it's an outline, and it feels like, and I ask people, I'm like, what is that creature that's in there with him? And it feels like a hologram. So maybe if we could just take a quick look at this clip with the understanding of crystalline computing, structured water in living systems, and the holographic cartoon Pegasus creature.
Professor of the Technion in Haifa, Israel. I'm a laureate of Nobel Prize in Chemistry, 2011, for the discovery of quasi-periodic crystals. Before that, the definition of a crystal was A crystal is a material in which atoms are ordered and periodic. Period. If you want to understand periodicity, look at tiles on the floor. If they are squares, then in each and every direction that you point, you see that the tile repeats themselves exactly the same way. This is a two-dimensional periodicity. Quasi-periodicity is more complex. It appears in nature in a more complex way, such as spirals that we find in pine cones and shells of certain sea lives. So let's talk about quasi-periodicity in two dimension, and the perfect example are Penrose tiles. And you can tile a floor with Penrose tile. You can do it quasi-periodically if you follow certain matching rules. And there will be no gaps and everything will be fitted properly. So two-dimensional Penrose, three-dimensional are quasi-periodic crystals. So the year was 1982, and after lunch, I put aluminum 25% manganese into the microscope and started to look at it. When I first saw the diffraction pattern with 10-fold rotation symmetry, I looked at it and said, in Hebrew, Ein chaya kazo. It means in English, there ain't no such animal. This discovery was a paradigm shift in crystallography, created a new definition of what is a crystal. So today we have many, many crystals. We have three-dimensional quasi-periodicity, hundreds of them, in fact. It's quite surprising that they were not discovered before.
What did you think of the creature? Like, to me, like it's a very short vignette. I think they were creating these with Nobel Prize winners, and so I'm assuming it's part of a series. But I feel like, especially when they talk, like they show all the icosahedrons spinning on the tiles, like to me that feels like photonic computing, like parallel computing. And if you understand that maybe the goal is to work with the structured water and crystalline structures in living systems and create these parallel computers, which again, in some respects, they may already be functioning that way, but to hijack those systems into something that is more engineered by AI or by systems of power. And like within the Dallas context, to me, the Pegasus really jumped out.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of like graphics, you know, with where they're making animations or video games or whatever, and they want to create a landscape, and so they duplicate certain, you know, images. If you zoom in, it's they're using kind of fractal imagery, but it's all just it's kind of duplications, but you don't actually necessarily see it off the bat. So I mean, I don't have the context to really wrap my mind around this in terms of actually engineering life. I was just, when I was talking, I was just kind of relating it to graphics, but.
Well, let's go, because I know Lynn's quick, so maybe we can just click through. Okay, so this is an article that Steffer shared with me, and I would encourage people to spend a little time with it, look it up. It's talking about biological sensing and bioinformational engineering. And when we were talking about commons before, Lynn, I felt like what's coming is that they want to frame everything as collective and commoning, which on the surface I don't have a problem with, but it's the way they're going to define it, and that we have mutual obligations to offer ourselves up to the commons to be computable and part of that system. And increasingly that's going to be happening through photonic and crystalline systems. So this is a very long article, but it's pretty easy to read. So it's talking about the use of the biosensors, which are crystals, in computing across life forms, biological life forms and ecosystems. This is in Rochester, actually it's Rochester Institute of Technology, not the University of Rochester, but they collaborate on photonics research, and they actually have a new digital media program called Magic Spell Studios. Right, so that seems very clear what the intention is in terms of optics, digital media, soundscape, acoustics, manipulating our understanding of reality. I mean, they straight up call it spell studios. And the work that's being done in the greater Rochester area around optics and photonics, they have a whole manufacturing public-private partnership collaborative that's being backed by the U.S. Defense Department. They're putting like $350 million into continuing these collaborations in developing optical systems and computing, like emerging technology computing systems that will, I think, really make us reframe our ability to interface with reality as we know it, material reality as we know it. They're going to restructure it. And Jason, as you said, like maybe in gaming environments or sampling, they will make things that look real that are not real. And so here we have the National Interoperability Collaborative, and this is where I wanted to make the connection between Greenlight and what's happening in California with the Trust Network. When I was early on working in that space, Datazone, which was backed by the Packard Foundation, was the big data lake that was going to collect on K-12 kids in San Jose, mostly targeting Latino communities initially, but now it's hundreds of thousands of kids in the greater San Jose area, for pre-K data, health behavior data, education data, welfare data, juvenile justice data, and foster care data. And now at the time that I was looking at this 5 years ago, I thought, wow, well, this is a big data grab, right? And this is to be used for these pay for success finance deals, which again, I feel like that is phase one, but I was not understanding the role of digital twinning and machine learning in that. And the Datazone was part of something called the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust that was initially seed funded by the NSF and then scaled by Chan Zuckerberg. So most of the people working in the education space understand about Chan Zuckerberg being part of the ed tech and privatization element, but then Chan Zuckerberg also has a whole other health component. And then that unit was going to be fed in through Stewards of Change and the National Interoperability Collaborative to have oceans of data of health and human service data, of which education at this point is only a small element, and then it becomes primarily social welfare data and health data systems. And this National Interoperability Collaborative and Stewards of Change were connected to fusion centers and the National Center on Crime and Delinquency. And so what I'm saying is if Greenlight is a parallel enterprise to this giant interoperable data lake for digital twinning and impact investing in California that they want to use to model, the three pilot states are California, Virginia, and Connecticut to scale health and human service data. And I think we can imagine where Perot Systems is in all of this, right? Their deep background with Dell too, in managing health and human service data within the privatization environment, but for the twinning, it's a story that isn't being told yet. And the fact that they have a really clunky website, Stewards of Change and National Interoperability Collaborative, they're not slick websites whatsoever. But their logo includes the icosahedron, I think is really interesting. And the Stewards of Change office on their 990 is literally a 10-minute drive from Cold Spring Harbor Labs, which is where the DNA helix was discovered by was Crick there, Watson and Crick, but it has ties to Cold Spring Harbor Labs and the Eugenics Records Office in the early 20th century, backed by the Mrs. Averill Harriman. So, I feel like that's the next part of the story that we have to get through to parents is that these digital twinnings on the back end, if this model of Datazone is something that would be, because we know they develop pilots and then they can just import them anywhere very quickly in the cloud, that the back end may be connected to fusion centers, right? And in a much more robust health data analytics and things that are tied in with the history of eugenics in that landscape. I think that's really important.
Can I point out the icosahedron, is that how you say it? The same symbol is used in the Institute for the Future videos of learning is earning, and they have that same when they're transacting, those
EduBlocks
of data, those are transferred in something that looks like either the polyhedron or the icosahedron. It's the same symbol.
I think they are.
Remember that?
Very much.
It spun around as like a yes. So it wasn't just the hexagonal 3D cube. It was the icosahedron.
It definitely was. That's a good point, Lynn. And maybe, Jason, I can stick a slide in there to show, because there is one piece of that video where they're actually all spinning. There's like maybe even a hexagon shape that's being filled in, and they're talking about
in the middle.
blocks. Yeah, and they're all spinning, which very much is in keeping with what you saw on the background of that guy's, the panels behind him in the office, is these spinning icosahedrons. And if you understand it within sort of quantum photonic structured water, like I think again, going back to Pegasus Park, why is it biotech and education? Why do those two things go together? You wouldn't think that they would go together, but if you understand the bigger picture of twinning towards like a worldwide parallel computing system, it makes more sense. And so this is just a press release from the Santa Clara County Board of Education launching the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust. And again, Priscilla Chan was the keynote, and she has her own little side project called the Primary School, where they're doing wraparound services for low-income Bay Area families. But within that launched that day, there was a panel discussion, and one of the members was David Hausler. And David Hausler is, his background, he was the person who put the genomic sequence on the internet for the public use. And again, why would genomics be part of the Silicon Valley Regional Data Trust, an educational data trust program, unless that was going to be part of the bigger picture, the biomedical sensing? So again, the Datazone grant I was revisiting, and it was what I missed in the fine print of this NSF grant was that the data integration was being advanced through the integrated justice information systems. So Stewards of Change was consulting with a prison industrial complex data system to get the identities going on. So that's, I think that's really important. That's something moms should know. In these other use cases, the data is being fed to fusion centers. The guidance on setting up the data systems are coming out of integrated judicial environments. Is that how we view our children? And which again feeds into, we know pre-K, Early Matters Dallas is a part of this, and it's not part of Greenlight at this point, but we know that they want to get the preschool children on blockchain to use the Heckman equation, is that the gentleman who developed the pre-K data analytics system that tracks payments and attendance and all sorts of data in the state of California. He was an employee prior to developing Wheel, which is the data integration system for pre-K in California. He was an employee of BAE, and his focus was on developing FBI case file software. So again, within this data economy, it is a militarized space, and it is a space of where children are it's a pre-crime space. All of this is treating children as pre-criminalization assets on blockchain so that they can play the games with their lives. And the National Laboratory for Education Transformation was a key player in that as well. Marcy Lauk was the contact, and the National Laboratory for Education Transformation, they were the ones that had many contracts with supercomputers. San Diego supercomputer, Los Alamos supercomputer, Darwinic in Austin with that supercomputer, Ogren National Lab supercomputers. And these supercomputers are now also doing genomic and biomedical computing, right? So they're doing simulations on education, and they're doing simulations on pandemic and all of that. And in that space, I mean, that directly connects California to Austin through the supercomputing center of NLET. And they were part of a subcontractor on a digital identity through NIST in 2012. So National Laboratory for Education Transformation, based in the Bay Area, I believe in the Ames campus, they were doing digital identity. This report was 2015, but I believe that the actual pilot started in 2011, 2012. So people imagine that these digital identity programs just happened recently because of pandemic, but that is not true. They've been working on digital identity setups at least since 2005, if not earlier. And these early stage pilots for using education and health data were happening through NIST at the federal level, connected through NLET in California, and then tangentially to Texas in 2011, 2012. So I just wanted to, again, revisit, this creature does not exist yet. And we've got the Pegasus. And again, the Pegasus was relocated to the hotel plaza, but I didn't realize that the little tower with the hexagons was the backdrop there. So I don't know if you have any closing words on like linking that, the Datazone to the credentials, to the pre-crime, to the fusion, to the surveillance. But that's something that I definitely want to get conveyed to the parents in Texas of what's behind this. And that ultimately beyond the profiling is the twinning towards potentially using emerging technologies to turn our bodies into systems that are part of their biophotonic quantum communication, all on blockchain.
I was just I was trying to figure out what's the next thing that people could do to stand in the gap, besides, prayer and going under in a bunker somewhere.
Good question. That's a tough one. I mean, my thing is, unless people have an understanding of what's going on, there's not a whole lot we can do. Like, there has to be at least a certain a certain level of understanding of what it is we're up against. Because most people, I don't think anyone that we know personally would actually be for this, including all those people on that board that you were testifying to,
Well, I know that Alison and I, all three of us have talked a lot about how faith communities are being enveloped in this, in some of these agendas. And so I think people, when it comes down to it, much of it is anti-life and God, but most of these things to me go against the fundamental. We are spiritual beings, and so most faiths, I think, at the core would reject this if they understood what it really is. However, some faiths are promoting it, and they're using they twist scripture to justify it. And so I think it's there are a lot of false prophets out there, and there are a lot of those who are trying to use faith and religion and spirituality to get people to accept this. So, I mean, I think sometimes the solution. My friend was just sending a message when I had sent the video of the Queen from Alison's clip. And it's like, well, remember, our friend said if you chase evil, then you're going to keep finding it. And so if you keep digging and digging for all these things, we're going to keep finding it. Well, there's some truth to that. But because we keep peeling back and peeling back and peeling back. But I think it's important for us. I think we have to get real about it. We have to acknowledge what's happening and call it into the light so that it's not successful, this virtual world that's being created around us, or an open air prison, as Alison calls it. So for me, it's a balance of talking about it, processing it, telling others about it, and looking for the signs of it in your own neighborhoods and areas where you live. And then saying, no, I don't want that. I reject that idea, and I do not consent to that. And so if you have a lot of people who see it coming and they can sound the alarms, then it doesn't have to materialize. It won't happen because we say we don't consent. Well, that's my solution. And I would not do and say all of these things if I didn't have hope, if I didn't think there were people who saw it too and know something is not right. And they're distracting the masses with all of these things like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. I'm like, why does that keep popping up on my feed? I wouldn't give any attention to it, but boy, was it was being forced on me at every turn.
Me too.
Why? I don't know. But it's probably just to distract us from what is really happening. And I think the kids are always a target. That's just the easiest like I said, the lowest hanging fruit to pull us into the system, this full spectrum dominance.
Yeah. Well, and even like you said, that you look at it, you look for darkness, you're going to find it. There's kind of the people that are about like self-actualization and the law of attraction. There's different versions of that in different spaces and different communities of like, we need to just put positive energy in and we'll get positive energy out, which I'm all for positive thinking, but like you said, we do have to face this thing and say no.
Yeah. And so I don't think I have the power, and as a person of faith, I know that I do not have the power. That's the Creator has the power. But I do believe that I am supposed to, when I do meet my maker, is he going to say, what did you do? You knew this and you did nothing. I can't do nothing. And so it's, I do think this is a spiritual battle for, and I mentioned it before, hearts, minds, souls, bodies, access to everything about us. And I think it's wrong. And so this is my way of resisting it and hopefully helping others to learn how to resist it.
Yeah, well, I think you do pretty good, Lynn. Like your approach is more like even killed like I come across as probably like totally out there, and maybe Alison too. But like I think you can interact with in certain spaces that like I don't know if I would get away with or.
Well, I think to me it feels like a possibility to bring people together, like for people to be their better selves. I don't know. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I don't think Lynn's getting us.
Something about better.
That's okay. I know you have to hop off, Lynn. This is probably good. We can just finish up. We can be done. But thank you. Do you think this was all right?
Sorry.
Yeah. All right.
Here. My dog can hear you.
Yeah, what does your dog think about all this? Yeah, I guess.
Okay, you're done.
Sorry, you can't hear.
Bye, Lynn.
Silence. Silence. Okay. All right. Sorry.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Love y'all. Thanks for doing what you do. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
I guess we'll just wrap this up. Alison, do you want to do a wrap up?
Yeah. So I just want to say how much I appreciate Lynn being, putting herself out in these spaces. Dallas is an epicenter for a lot of different kinds of impact investing and smart cities and data analytics, and to run for to be on the community college board, to take advantage, to be the public face of this. I do a lot behind the scenes, but it's really writing in videos, and Lynn is the one who's actually in the rooms with the folks and navigating that. So you said it really well, Jason. Lynn is exceptional in that. And I would agree with her. I think at this point it is our test. I wrote a recent blog post about these soul-bound tokens, and it feels like, okay, if this is how the world goes, how do you react to it? And maybe everyone will see it, but those of us who do, we need to. And if it is holographic, that's the thing about the hologram. I taught myself about holography the last couple days. The thing about the hologram is it is a physical representation of a three-dimensional object that lands like on a recording medium through intersecting wave forms. And so the waveforms intersect and they hit an object, and then the interference waves, that's what makes the pattern. And then it actually allows you to look at it from all sides. But it's not a chemical bond like a photograph done with chemistry. It's actually physical. And if you cut up a hologram, any one part of the hologram has the information of the whole hologram. Like you can cut the hologram in like 5 pieces, and the thing that you represented is on all of them. And so I feel like in that space, even small interventions in imprints we make into cumulative hologram of the universe, like, matter, because you can't cut us out. Like, once we've made that impression, it's there. Ask the question. We've taken away the plausible deniability. We've laid out a counter story, a counter. That's all we can do, because the power to change this is beyond any of us individually. But then, as Lynn said, when the time is done and they say, well, did you do all you could? Hopefully we will be at a point that we will feel like we've done all we can. So, and I appreciate you very much for all of your efforts in helping produce these segments that we can get it out, Jason, with wider audiences, Yeah. Maybe someday we'll start to reach that 10,000 barrier. We're still hovering at 1, 2, 3,000.
I mean, I just know that I need to come up with more things that are outside of the YouTube, Google world, because it's so controlled. I mean, my channel, I don't get any views on my channel hardly at all now when I post stuff. So yeah, it sucks. As far as the intersecting waves, I used to do a lot of projections. As a VJ, I would do shows, and I would project images while the band was playing or whatever, or a DJ was making music, and people are always trying to come up with cool new ways to present the digital images, and people wanted to figure out how you could create like almost a hologram using just projectors. And there was some artists who had created some where it was actually like mist. They used mist, and the light was hitting the water, the little water droplets, and then it created an almost like a holographic look. Anyway, so I'm able to wrap my mind a little bit around that because of some of my background in projections, because that's what we're talking about. You're talking about projections, but doing it on a wave level, I still need to explore that more to really fully understand. Not that I'll fully understand it, but to understand it a little more. Because like I said, that video of that guy, just the only frame that I have to put that into is just in terms of graphics, but they're this is more than just graphics, right? It's it's playing with life itself, which is crazy.
And I think the thing that I'm getting to is that it's beyond the CRISPR stuff. It's beyond I think that's something that Nature article, if you dig into it more, is that the idea that information can be transmitted optically through light and directed. And so when I keep saying the stuff that happened around COVID, I don't think we actually understand what happened. I don't think that the people who are doing the bioengineering fully understand how the system works. They understand it in a very reductive way. And there may be people behind them that aren't public facing that do know the larger systems around photonics and crystalline computing and biophotons, but it's not making it into the public realm. And so I think they want us to imagine that is this reductive, we're going to slice and store things in your genes and that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that that's not real, but that isn't the whole story. There's something much bigger going on, both in terms of their potential to weaponize it, but I think anything that they can weaponize is something that we have an innate power of acting to counterbalance, because I do think that life intuitively stands with living systems. And so, as Roll says, Silicon Icarus, there at some point the sun is going to melt the wax off those wings and this thing is going to come crashing down, but we just have to hold the line till then.
Silicon Pegasus.
Silicon Pegasus. I just want to say thanks for Steffers, Peace of Mindful, and Jen Lake at Polio Forever, and Roll and Leo at Silicon Icarus, because all of this stuff is kind of moving ahead in the same trajectory. So within the spirit of a real collective and collaboration, I think that's what's beautiful, is when we can find groups of people who are like-minded, who are oh, okay, I found this. How does this work? I appreciate that. That's something that helps keep me going. So.